Bear down, Chicago Bears. Make every play clear the way to victory. Bear down, Chicago Bears. Put up a fight with a might so fearlessly. We'll never forget the way you thrilled the nation. With your T-formation, bear down, Chicago Bears, and let them know why you're wearing the crown. You're the pride and the joy of Illinois, Chicago Bears, bear down. And so that's what I was doing in my spare time.
You just found a new open for the show right there.
I believe you are right.
Yeah, throw that on social media. Be like, which barroom jackass is singing this? Can you name this crooner?
Oh my God.
Good stuff, man. What was that voice? That funny voice that you did, like Elmo or something like that? You did for us?
Yeah.
Oh God, sorry.
Hello, everybody. Bear down, Chicago Bears.
Yeah. All right. We're not going to go down this rabbit hole.
Oh my God.
That's exactly what we need to cheer everybody up after today.
Absolutely right. You ain't kidding. You are not kidding at all.
I think we should extend Mitchell Trubisky.
The following program is a production of the Barroom Network. It is intended for all audiences.
Doug Buffone.
This defense sucks. This is moronic.
John Buffone.
If your best run plays are coming off end arounds, there's a problem.
Doug was behind the microphone first. He never held back.
Very difficult to score when your offense is on the bench. When your defense is out there giving up 70, 80, 70, 64-yard drives.
Now, it's his nephew, John, and there's no holding this Buffone back either.
An offensive-minded coach that's running an offense that got 9.5 yards. A beaten-up defense that isn't necessarily performing in key situations. And a quarterback that was expected to take a big step forward looks like an unsalvageable wreck.
I've had it. I have had it. I want somebody to get kicked in the ass.
How many games can you rattle off that involve the team running the ball 7 times and they win? I can't think of any.
I don't mind you getting beat. I got my ass whipped many times. But I tell you, I took somebody down with me.
Because Bears fans wanted to believe in the worst way that Chicago had a stable, competitive franchise. And this is what we got.
It's Buffone 55, the John Buffone Show.
Hello and welcome, everybody, to another edition of Buffone 55, a fast-paced approach at breaking down the Chicago Bears. And after that end-of-the-year press conference we heard earlier, I'm sure you're very excited for the 2021 season. I'm John Buffone, and with me, as always, is my producer and co-host, Alyssa Barbieri. Alyssa, I can tell you're just jazzed up and ready to go into 2021. Let's start the season right now.
Why don't we already feel like they've lost the 2021 season? I feel like I wasted an hour and a half of my life that I can never get back listening to those bozos talk.
Yeah, honestly, this entire thing could have been handled in an email or a press release. And I'm just sitting, I'm like, I know that it's possible to okay, they lost the press conference, they won the press conference. This wasn't even showing up to a press conference. You might as well put a recording of all those catchphrases and just put it up to a microphone and say, here's our end of the year press conference.
Yeah, and it just, it's what Bears fans fear the most, right? Once again, stuck in mediocrity. Any hope that, maybe getting rid of Pace or Nagy or even Ted Phillips just completely brushed aside. Apparently they're okay with finishing 8-8 and making it to the playoffs, but, obviously Bears fans are not. So we'll see how long this lasts.
Striving for mediocrity. And Alyssa, before we recap on not just the Bears wild card game, but the future of this organization, can you let our new listeners know what it is we do around here?
Absolutely. So this episode of Buffone 55 will have 3 segments where we're going to start with our B55 segment. That's when I ask John 5 questions and his responses must be completed within 55 seconds. The 55 is John's way of paying tribute to the great Doug Buffone, his uncle, his mentor, and a man who played 15 seasons with the Bears and wore number 55. Then we're going to welcome our guest, JJ Stankovitz, who covers the Bears for NBC Sports Chicago, where he's going to recap this 2020 season and look ahead to the offseason. We then finish things up by going into the basement, Buffone's basement, one last time, where Aldo Gandia joins John and me, and the three of us are going to preview what's a pretty important offseason and just kind of rehash what the hell just happened during that press conference. But first, our B55 segment. So, John, are you ready to let it all out?
This should be therapeutic. Let's go ahead and do it.
Okay, John. So the 2020 season is officially, thank God, over for the Chicago Bears. Looking over their loss to the Saints, what stood out the most to you? Good luck squeezing all of that into 55 seconds.
Well, I know we didn't have the highest expectations going into the game, but I was pissed off afterwards. And you want to know why? Because they actually had a shot to win the game. New Orleans allowed them a shot to win this game. As a heavy underdog on the road, you have to take advantage of every opportunity you are given, and the Bears couldn't capitalize on anything. The coaching, the execution, the discipline, it was all just embarrassing. The drop touchdown by Javon Wims, the quarterback running out of bounds on fourth down, unsportsmanlike conduct penalties, punching an opposing player, giving up multiple 3rd and longs when you have a chance to get off the field on defense, jumping off sides on 4th down, missed interception opportunities, only getting a field goal off of a big turnover. I'm out of breath, but it's hard enough to win when the other team is better than you. It's impossible when you make so many stupid mistakes. So I was really upset because if the Bears came to town ready to play, they could have won that game.
Absolutely. That was the most frustrating part, is that if they played like a football team, they would have beaten the Saints. Obviously, then they would have gone into Lambeau and they'd probably gotten the crap kicked out of them. But, at the same time, they had a chance to win that game. And, you were saying you're very upset afterwards. I was just kind of thinking about like the contrast between the two playoff games, right? 2018, after the double doink, just complete wreck. And after this, I was just like, Like it was weird because there was like no emotion. You didn't even expect them to get into the playoffs, because technically they shouldn't have been in the playoffs this year.
Well, yeah. If they don't have that number 7 seed, they're not in the playoffs. In 2018, you just had your heart ripped out of your chest on what happened there. Here, it was just like, come on, and like they had a chance. Like, you were happy they're in, and like they had a chance, and it was just like, now I'm irritated. I'm not heartbroken. I'm irritated because I thought they could have won the game if they would have just capitalized on a a few opportunities.
Absolutely. And man, I had to turn to the Nickelodeon broadcast, like with the slime at the end there. I was like, just give me something to root for here at this point.
Yeah, Mitch Trubisky got the MVP. I'm sure that's going in the trophy case sometime soon.
Hey, that's one thing that Watson or Mahomes doesn't have. Just saying.
Yeah, that's why we drafted him.
Exactly. He's the MVP winner. So, John, during the game, something, that was infuriating was that Anthony Miller was ejected for punching CJ Gardner-Johnson. If that name sounds familiar, that is the same guy that Javon Wims punched back in the Bears' first matchup with New Orleans. What did that fiasco tell you about Anthony Miller's future with the Bears? 55 seconds is on the clock.
Well, I think it says a number of things. Matt Nagy said after the game that they actually took time out of their week of preparation to talk about not letting Gardner-Johnson get under their skin. So Anthony Miller, who already had an elevated role since Darnell Mooney couldn't play, goes out and inexplicably punches the guy that the head coach was preaching to leave alone. What does this show me? It shows me Anthony Miller lets his emotions get in the way. It shows that he really doesn't let his coach's instructions sink in, and it shows how effective a special coaching session from Matt Nagy really is. I don't think Anthony Miller is on this team next year, if I'm being honest. I don't think Javon Wims is either, but that's a different topic. Remember, this is a guy that Ryan Pace traded back into the second round for in 2018. And he was usurped by a rookie 5th rounder this year. This receiving core is going to look different next year. Maybe Allen Robinson leaves on his own, but I think Anthony Miller is done here because they actually save money if they cut him. So this is just another Ryan Pace draft pick that gets to wash out. But I think that he might have played his last game as a Bear.
And we brought back Ryan Pace because, it just feels like the endless cycle, right? But like you were mentioning, the thing with it was just infuriating because how many times have we heard Mike Fury talk about Anthony Miller and, him being in the right mental space, right? That's been like a focus dating back to his rookie season. And, in this game, in a playoff game, he lost it. And again, I felt like one of those moments where, it was one of those turning points. And, again, the CJ Gardner-Johnson, like you said, they spent like a good while watching highlights of him doing that. And Anthony Miller was like, oh yeah, people like that are going to, be like that. Well, then, why did you respond? He let his emotions get the best of him, like you were saying, John. So I'm with you. I think that I don't see Anthony Miller here next season, nor Javon Wims. Obviously, the Bears are going to have to, make add to the receivers room this offseason, especially if Allen Robinson's not here. But yeah, Anthony Miller, you might have just seen him in his last game in a Bears uniform.
Inexcusable across the board. And it was inexcusable when Javon Wims did it, but especially after it happened the first time, to have a guy that you are depending on. He was your number 2 receiver in that game because Mooney was out. You needed him. You're relying on him, and he let you down.
Right. You kind of give Javon Wims, weirdly enough, the benefit of the doubt because it was like the first time it happened. But when Anthony Miller saw that, how do you do the same thing? Just it's just completely inexcusable. And so after the game, John, Mitchell Trubisky said that he could definitely see himself back in Chicago next year, but a lot of things are out of his control. Do you think there's any chance Mitch returns to the Bears in 2021? 55 seconds and go.
I'll be honest. His tone didn't really sound like a guy that thinks he's coming back. It wasn't like, yeah, I can definitely see myself back here. It actually sounded like it's like the same tone when my friends text me to go out and I'm already in bed watching Netflix. It's like, yeah, I can definitely see myself back here. Text me when you're there. All right. All right, cool. All right. Talk to you later. Look, we saw in Green Bay and in the playoff game what this coaching staff thinks of Mitch. They left the training wheels on because they don't trust him. And I get it. We saw some of his limitations on the field, not making all of his reads, quickly checking down on 3rd and long, not diving for a first down when it was 4th down. But if I'm him, I don't know if I want to come back if this is how I'm going to be used. Let me find a coach like Belichick or Vrabel that caters an offense to a player's strength and doesn't force a square peg into a round hole. Like I've been saying for the last 2 months, I just saw more avenues for Mitch not returning to the Bears than I saw this avenue that he was going to come back and be the quarterback in 2021.
Yeah, and I think it was made abundantly clear this press conference on Wednesday that, Mitch is not in the plans. They were talking of Nick Foles a lot. They were talking about, everything's on the table about the quarterback position. And again, they kind of made it seem like it was all on the quarterback, which, he was a big part of it, both him and Foles' performances. But obviously it's a group effort. But it just doesn't seem like Trubisky is going to come back. And, I think that's best for both parties involved. Let them go their separate ways. Let Trubisky go somewhere else. He's obviously going to have to be a backup, but let him go somewhere fresh, start anew. Let Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy, draft a quarterback and, probably get fired next year. And, so I just think I don't see Trubisky returning. I thought there was a better chance of it probably even before wild card weekend, but, I don't see any way that he returns. But now, watch Ryan Pace go and do the opposite.
You painted such a positive picture there as far as the Bears' outlook of the future. but that's what we're looking at right now. So I think we all wish the best for Mitch. I hope he's a great guy. And I don't think no one's ever questioned his character. So he's just an easy guy to root for. I just think his time in Chicago is probably done.
Yeah, and it's obviously, I think it's what's for the best. So, John, amid a lot of speculation that defensive coordinator Chuck Pagano might be let go after the season, the 60-year-old coach has decided to retire. What is your take on this move, and who should be in the sights for the Bears as the defensive coordinator in 2021? The clock starts when you do.
Listen, this team has invested all of its money into the defense, into guys like Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, Eddie Jackson, Kyle Fuller, and Akeem Hicks. It's safe to say that a lot of those guys have regressed or not lived up to the money they're being paid. So some of that is on the players themselves, and some of that is likely coaching. I think Pagano was going to be let go anyway, and that was going to be the big move the Bears made to suffice the fan base that was calling for change. But as far as suitors go, well, what big-time external candidate are you going to get with a potential lame duck staff? We'll get to that in a second, but I think they make an internal move here. Jay Rodgers has been the defensive line coach with the Bears since 2015. He has developed a lot of good football players. He survived the John Fox firing with Vic Fangio. He won Best Defensive Line Coach of 2018. I think it just makes sense. And the Bears maybe should have went this route before, since we now see former linebackers coach Brendan Staley getting head coaching consideration just 2 years after leaving the Chicago Bears. So I think they probably make an internal move here.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at it from the outside perspective. Who wants to come to Chicago when you know that Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace are likely gone after next year? So, I think they're going to have a hard time bringing in a quality guy from the outside. So like you said, I do see them going internally. Jay Rogers is someone that stands out. Ted Monachino. There's quite a few internal, they can look internally to bring somebody up. And I just don't see it being an attractive job not from the roster standpoint, but again, from the security with Pace and with Nagy. So, I mean, we'll see what happens, but I would probably lean more towards turning to an internal candidate.
Yeah, and I get it that if a positions coach from another team is saying, well, even if it is a lame duck staff, at least I get to put defensive coordinator on my resume, so I can maybe get another defensive coordinator position. But then you're looking at like other teams' positional coaches, and if you're going to do that, you might as well take the guy that already knows the system, knows the players, and has proven that he can be a successful defensive line coach. So I just think that me personally think that it'll probably be an internal hire.
And so, John, the biggest news coming out of Hallis Hall this week, at least for now, is that it is believed that Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace are safe, which we now know, much to the dismay of many Bears fans. So, John, we've talked about this. We talked about the subject for the majority of the season, but how do you feel about Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy running it back for another year? No clock on this one. Let's hear it.
Well, there's my heart, and then there's my mind. My heart is where the hope comes from. I hope these guys can figure it out. I hope that they find a quarterback that can succeed in Chicago, and everything we've been told over the last 3 years about the offense's potential comes to fruition. I hope that operating on a non-COVID schedule in the offseason gives this team what it needs to take the next step. Hopefully, it allows quarterback coach John DeFilippo the whole offseason to develop whoever they bring in. I hope the aging defense under a new coordinator can turn back the clock for a season or two while the offense catches up. I hope this team can strive for something better than 8-8. But then there's my brain. And my brain is where the fear comes from. I fear that this franchise is putting off the inevitable for another year. I fear that the regime that brought us Mike Glennon, traded up for Mitchell Trubisky, and thought they fixed everything with Nick Foles is going to invest a high draft pick on another quarterback. A quarterback that might be forced upon the next coaching staff in GM. If Matt Nagy is let go in 2021, I fear that the next coach will be tied to a quarterback he didn't have a say in choosing, just like Nagy didn't have a say in choosing Trubisky. What if the new coach runs a system that doesn't fit the young quarterback? I fear Ryan Pace, knowing that he's on his last leg, goes all in, gets aggressive with free agents, maybe even trades future draft capital to hopefully push this team into contender status in 2021. Be damned 2022 and beyond. I fear this vicious cycle repeats itself. But when you're a Bears fan, all you can do is accept the fear and hope something changes for the good. We'll talk to JJ Stankovitz of NBC Sports Chicago right after this.
I'll tell you what, you know what I think the Mike North Advantage needs? A theme song. You know, something like the Mike North Advantage. It's there for you. The Mike North Advantage. You'll enjoy it too. You know, you got guys like Mike Ditka, Chris Orch, Jim McMahon, a baseball, Hawk Harrelson, Jesse Rogers, if you will. We cover all the sports every Wednesday. Subscribe to Bears Barroom. We got nothing but great podcasts. Check it out. Bears Barroom. Follow us on Twitter at Bears Barroom. And North to North for times and everything else if there's any changes. 10 o'clock, Wednesday, plus podcast. See ya.
Welcome back to Buffone 55. We are fortunate enough to have NBC Sports Chicago's JJ Stankovitz with us today to help us sort through some of the big storylines following the 2020 season. He's also an Incubus superfan. JJ, how you doing? Appreciate you being on.
I'm doing great. When I agreed to come on your show, John, I did not expect that it would follow probably the worst press conference in Bears history, which I don't think I'm using hyperbole when I say that. So I'm sure we got a lot to talk about here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were present for that press conference. They brought the whole band back. What are your thoughts on them getting another shot? And in reality, the whole tone of that press conference. Because if you're a Bears fan and you watch that, can you really expect anything to change in 2021? Do you trust Pace to have another chance at drafting a quarterback? What was the overall tone, and why should Bear fans feel, I guess, positive?
I don't know why they should feel positive, to be honest. I thought the overall tone was condescending, and it did not strike any of the notes that I believe the Bears had to hit. And this is specifically with George McCaskey and Ted Phillips. You know, what Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy had to say was about what we would expect. Ryan Pace was cagey, dodged about every question he got. Quite frankly, I couldn't even tell you what Matt Nagy said in it, because not that I didn't care, but we've heard from Matt Nagy enough this year. I was interested in what Pace and Nagy and Phillips, or Pace and Phillips and McCaskey would have to say. But for the Bears to go about this, it was always going to be a very unpopular decision to not have any major change, certainly. But the way that the Bears went about this press conference, the opportunity for George McCaskey and Ted Phillips to address their fans, to provide so much money, so much time invested in this team. The way they went about it was really a black eye for the organization, I think. It was condescending. It was, essentially treating fans like they're stupid, and it did not strike any of the notes that they needed to hit to convince fans that Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy are the right people for the job still. It essentially came across to me as George McCaskey saying, I understand this is not going to be a popular decision, but I like these people and they're staying in their jobs, and I'm the chairman, so that's that. And that doesn't convince anyone. It doesn't. And based on the reaction I saw on Twitter and everything, that I don't know if there was a Bears fan out there who liked what they heard today from the leadership of the team that they support.
100%. And one of the more bizarre things, and maybe this is protocol for other teams, or maybe I just haven't heard this question enough throughout a lot of press conferences, but was it bizarre to you that they wouldn't address what the actual lengths of the contracts were for Pace and Nagy?
That was confounding. And we just taped our Under Center podcast with myself and Cam Ellis, and on that I said, I don't know who advised George McCaskey, Ted Phillips, and Ryan Pace to decline to discuss this, to not be forthcoming with their fans about this. I don't know who did that, but whoever did that needs to reconsider why that decision was made, because it was a really bad look for this organization that is asking fans to trust them to withhold very simple information that they have given in the past, information that will allow fans to get a better grasp on the moves that are going to be made this offseason, whether it's, does Ryan Pace have 1 year left in his contract? Does he have 2 years left? Did he get a contract extension? These are all questions we don't know. And that, to me, that was one of the worst moments of the press conference, was, Ted Phillips saying it's not pertinent to this discussion, when it is absolutely pertinent to the discussion how long Ryan Pace's contract runs through right now. That is an important fact. And I understand the Bears don't have to provide it. That's their prerogative. But to me, that was a slap in the face to us, the media, who were going about that press conference. I thought Hub Arkish asked a very well-worded question to Ryan Pace about it. He then declined to answer. But if I'm a fan watching that, I don't know. What did you guys think? I mean, what did you think about that?
When they declined, I'm just like, why are you hiding this most basic information whenever this is supposed to be transparent? This is supposed to be something that, okay, we're putting it, as we heard 1,000 times, we're putting everything on the table except what our contracts are. So that's kind of what was peculiar to me, because it seems like the most basic information that you can give. And we know players' contracts, we know the lengths, the what they're being paid, and nobody asked Ryan Pace or Matt Nagy what they were making. No one cares about what their salaries are. But to dodge the question of what is the length of your contract, even if they aren't really hiding anything, what do they have to gain by not being transparent about it?
Well, and I guess what they think they have to gain is optics. And
they lost that.
Right. They screwed it up. They miscalculated it. But I guess maybe they were thinking, well, the optics of, admitting that Ryan only has 1 year left in his contract and he's basically a lame duck are not good. Or the optics of we gave Ryan a contract extension are not good, which certainly they wouldn't be. But the optics of lying to your fan base are worse. I think that fans just wanted some honesty today, and I don't think they got it.
No, you're 100% right. And it's just another example of this franchise being run like a mom and pop shop and not a 2021 business. And another tidbit or another soundbite that really got Bears fans in a tizzy, myself included, was when Ted Phillips talked about the Bears having a culture that all teams strive for, which made many Bears fans set their hair on fire. All we hear about is this culture and how they handle adversity. But I don't think I'm alone, JJ, in thinking that maybe the team wouldn't have to show how they handle adversity if they didn't lose 6 straight to begin with. So after 6 years on the job, why do we continuously see this leash just elongate for Ryan Pace? What is the deal with this?
Because they like him. They like him personally. It is very little to do with the roster he's built, although credit any of the bettors out there who put, $10 on Darnell Mooney plus 5,000 to be the first player mentioned in this press conference because you won a lot of money today. They like Ryan Pace. Then the personal relationship has played out in a way that has been emphasized, which is fine. On a level, George McCaskey is the owner. He can do what he wants, and he can keep people around who he likes. That doesn't mean the people who support his organization are going to like it at all. And that line that Phillips said, that was one of the worst moments of the press conference, I thought, for the Bears, because just 3 days ago, your starting quarterback, who is not going to be back, but your starting quarterback in a playoff game, after the playoff game said, we still need to build a championship culture here. And then Ted Phillips said, we have a culture that every NFL team will envy. Well, I'm going with what Mitch said. I don't think every NFL team envies the Bears culture because the Bears don't win. Yes, they may have a good feeling inside Hallis Hall and they're loyal to their employees, which counts for a lot. Don't get me wrong. But this is the NFL. I mean, we're not here to make everyone feel good. We're here to win. And that's what the goal should be. And on the Under Center podcast, our producer, Tony Gill, put it the best. He said, the Bears told on themselves today. They told on themselves that winning is not the priority. It's not the number one priority. And they showed it with their actions and their words today.
It's that lyrical lemonade money coming in, isn't it, JJ?
You are a loyal listener to the Under Center podcast, and you will be happy to know that I brought up the lyrical lemonade deal again on the podcast today.
It's all about that lyrical lemonade money. But moving forward, I think a big concern for some of these, for a lot of Bears fans, are you're giving Ryan Pace potentially 1 year to get it right. So this could be a scorched earth kind of thing where he could potentially mortgage the future, go all in on 2021, try to get them into contender status because, there is no tomorrow for him, but potentially trade some draft capital, max out whatever cap they could possibly have, give out one more bad contract, and then he could be gone after 2021. But the guy, whoever is coming in 2022 says, well, look what they left me with. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely, that's a possibility, because the Bears have charged Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy now with needing to see progress. That's what Ted Phillips, that's what George McCaskey said, and that's good. The Bears need to show progress, certainly. But when you're charging someone with needing to show progress, or else, well, your contract won't take care of itself and you're going to be out of a job. that can lead to some desperate moves. And Ryan Pace has already shown a penchant for over-aggression with some moves that he's made that have blown back in his face. And now you're asking him to do that again. And, these are the kind of things. It's not just if the Bears go out and sign the wrong quarterback. It's the moves the Bears would have to make to go out and sign the wrong quarterback, which would be, restructuring someone's contract who shouldn't be restructured, or extending a player who's approaching or over 30 into his mid to late 30s to free up cap space in the immediate term. There are some very damaging moves that Ryan Pace is going to be able to make as the Bears GM and as someone who is, having to show progress. Otherwise, he's going to lose his job. You're handing the keys to the franchise to someone and saying, you have to get from point A to point B, but that guy might drive 85 miles an hour and wrecks a car before he gets to point B. It's a really, really dangerous path. And I wrote about this on NBCSportsChicago.com that this is the kind of stuff that gets you stuck for years. These are the kind of moves that might be made out of over-aggression for a one-year payoff to keep everyone's job that don't work out. And then, like you said, John, the next GM shows up and goes, I don't like what we have available here. This isn't good. This is a long process. And Ryan Pace went through the same thing when he took over as GM in 2015 because Phil Emery left him such a disaster. And Ryan Pace, if things don't go well this offseason, Ryan Pace will not have left the Bears better than he found them. That would be maybe the worst indictment of his tenure, that he would not have actually improved the Bears situation long term after taking over for Phil Emery.
Right. And the new GM could come in with no cap space, an aging team, and very little draft capital if that's what Ryan Pace wants to do in 2021. And one of these positions, and they talk about it ad nauseum in Chicago just because we haven't had a Hall of Fame quarterback or even a effective quarterback for quite some time. So Mitchell Trubisky said he could see himself in Chicago next season, but if you listen to the press conference, it doesn't sound like that's going to be the case. So Nick Foles is the only quarterback under contract in 2021. Do you see them going out and using a high draft pick on a quarterback, or are they going to go the veteran route? Because if Nagy is maybe trying to save his job into 2022, perhaps you use Foles as that bridge guy for the rookie. And then you say, whoa, you can't fire us. We just drafted this rookie and he's really going to shine in year 2. You got to keep me around until at least 2022. Could we see them have their hands in another high draft pick on a quarterback?
I think every situation is on the table to steal what Ryan Pace said today, including the really bad situations. The ones that are very concerning to a fan base that is a lot smarter than I think the Bears gave them credit for today. I think what probably is going to happen is that the Bears will they'll sign like a low level quarterback in free agency and then draft someone. And I think at this point, this is kind of projecting far out. If I were making odds on this thing, I might put the highest odds that the Bears trade up in the draft to go get a quarterback. Because that to me is the surest fire way to save your job, is you go and say, all right, you want to see progress? Well, I'm going to go out and get a quarterback who maybe won't be ready in year 1, but we can show progress with that quarterback. We can show that he has made progress with the Bears. The problem with that is that if you go and you trade up for a quarterback, you're taking away resources that you're going to need to build a situation around that quarterback where he can thrive. So you're not going to be able to draft an offensive lineman in the first round. You're maybe missing out on a wide receiver here or there. You're not going to be able to go get the other pieces that you need for that quarterback to be successful. And kind of your doomsday scenario here is a situation like the one Mitch Trubisky walked into in 2017, which might wind up being very similar if Allen Robinson leaves in free agency, where you'll have one budding wide receiver, in this case, Darnell Mooney is Cam Meredith, and an offensive line that has a good interior and some questions at the tackles, which is what the Bears are looking at right now, and a 1,000-yard running back in David Montgomery. Like it might be a similar situation. And that led the Bears in 2017 to have to eventually trade for Dontrell Inman at the trade deadline because Mitch had no one to throw to. And this is my worry for this team, that they're going to go all in on drafting a young quarterback and then ruin him by not having the pieces around him he needs. That is a real, that would, and to then go up and get that young quarterback, you're trading away a first round pick. To me, that's the doomsday scenario, is going up and getting that quarterback, but then stunting his development in year one and leaving the next regime with very little to work with.
Yeah, that's when you got Kendall Wright as your number one receiver, and you got to try to make a young quarterback work with that. But you talked about that wide receiver position. That's another thing that's in a lot of flux, because asking about whether they're going to use the franchise tag on Allen Robinson, and it's obvious that Allen Robinson doesn't really want that to happen. Whether does he even want to stay in Chicago? I personally, and I said this in the segment before, I don't think Anthony Miller or Javon Wims will be on this team next year. They actually saved some money by getting rid of Anthony Miller. But then you're stuck with Darnell Mooney, who is obviously showed some flashes this year, but is he ready to be a number one? So what do you think this receiving core is going to look like if you have a coach and a GM that is with their feet to the fire to win now? Why would you not really try to bring Allen Robinson back?
Well, that's a good question. The question then is to become, is this a two-way street? Does Allen Robinson want to come back? The Bears can use the franchise tag, and Allen Robinson, who is a very smart person and who knows the ins and outs of the CBA, is going to be pissed if you use the franchise tag in a way that I think no player likes the franchise tag. I think Allen Robinson would be furious if they use the franchise tag on him, because it would be like, I mean, what a slap in the face that would be. Like, you had all year to get an extension done with me. You never sent me an offer that I thought was even serious. And now you're having the gall to use the franchise tag on me when I just risked my third contract playing for you in 2020 without an extension. To me, that would, if he were to say, I'm not playing for you guys if you use the tag on me, trade me, he would be well within his rights and well within the boundaries of reason to do that. But the problem is that, to get Allen Robinson, you're talking about, now that he's going to hit the open market, to sign him to an extension, you're probably talking 4 years, $84 million with $52.5 million guaranteed. And I'm not just spouting those numbers out because Allen Robinson likes to tweet with those exact numbers today. That's more money than the Bears can pay. If they do that, they're not going to have money to go address the other needs on their roster. But they need Allen Robinson to have any shot at showing progress in 2021. So this is where you're kind of seeing the dilemma here, that there are too many needs for the Bears to fill with the resources they have right now. And yeah, you can create cap space. You can do all these things. But eventually you're going to be taking away from the talent on your roster if you create enough cap space to go get a quarterback and a left tackle and a number one wide receiver. You're going to be taking away from the defense. You're going to be taking away Kyle Fuller and Akeem Hicks from that defense to do that. And if you do that, then your team's not going to be good enough overall to show progress next year, and you're right back where you started. I think the Bears have a very, very small needle to thread here. It's going to be borderline impossible for them to do it. And there's very little in Ryan Pace's history that suggests he can do it.
Yeah, I don't see how, with all of the issues going on, you could possibly turn this around and show that quote unquote progress that Ted Phillips and McCaskey were talking about. So I just don't know how they feel like this is going to be a different team moving into 2021. You brought up the salary cap. And so I know this is really, really early to be talking about this, but who do you think could potentially be on the cutting block as far as clearing up some of that space? We know that Massey and Leno could be cut. We know that there maybe could be some guys that they trade to get off the books. You're not going to be able to get rid of Robert Quinn because of his contract situation. Is there anyone that comes to mind when you think about who could be maybe not a surprise cut, but could be a cap casualty moving into the 2021 season?
The easy, sensible ones would be Bobby Massey, Buster Skrine, and Jimmy Graham, which would save the Bears about $15-16 million against the cap, which is not insignificant, but it doesn't do enough of a dent to go address the serious needs that you have on the rest of your roster. Cutting Charles Leno would free up $5-point-something million, but you're also shouldering on more than that in dead cap in 2021. I kind of think Leno, especially with Ryan Pace staying, I think Leno probably stays too at left tackle. And once you get past those guys, you could cut Anthony Miller and save $1.2 million. Once you get past those guys, though, now we're talking about, you can cut Akeem Hicks and save $12 million. But who wants to cut Akeem Hicks? Come on.
Not if you're trying to win.
Cut Kyle Fuller. Right. You could cut Kyle Fuller and save $20 million. But you're not cutting Kyle Fuller if you're trying to win. You could, you could restructure Khalil Mack's contract and free up some money. I don't think it's a risky thing, but you are talking about now committing yourself to more years of someone who turns 30 in February. You have to make these decisions clear-eyed, and you could do that. You could restructure Cody Whitehair's contract. Maybe not a bad move, but now you're committing to him for a longer period of time. These things all have consequences, and I think what Ryan Pace thought he would do, especially when he signed Eddie Jackson to that contract extension, was, okay, next year we can just borrow from Eddie's contract because he's great. He's going to be fine. And we can just borrow from his contract to free up cap space in the short term. Well, you're not restructuring Eddie Jackson's contract right now. You're not committing yourself to him for longer than you need to after this season. So the Bears have quickly run out of options here. You're not doing it with Danny Trevathan. You're not doing it with Robert Quinn. So you're really running out of options fast to clear up cap space. The Bears have a lot of money committed to players who there is not wiggle room for them. There's not wiggle room for restructures or cuts based on their performance and their contract. That's the kind of thing that hamstrings the franchise and keeps them in a mediocre to bad space for a long time.
And just talking about all those high-priced players on defense, before I throw you over to Alyssa, who do you anticipate being in the sights for defensive coordinator in 2021? Do you think it'll be an internal hire? Because I said this in the previous segment, I don't see a lot of high-end external candidates wanting to come to a potential lame duck organization unless it's a positional coach who's just trying to get defensive coordinator on his resume. How do you see this shaking out as far as defensive coordinator goes?
So John, I actually think it might be the opposite of that, what you just described. Okay. That I think some of those position coaches who are the up and coming guys who want to get DC on their resume, I don't think they're going to want to come to the Bears because you could get DC on your resume, but it's for a year.
Right.
I think it might be more likely that it's the opposite, that someone like George Edwards or Terrell Austin, guys who have spent time as defensive coordinators in the NFL and are not in coordinator roles right now, could be on the radar. I think internal candidates, Jay Rodgers certainly deserves a look. You could really take a look at any of these coaches you want. You could probably talk yourself into, Sean Desai's a Vic Fangio disciple. Ted Monachino's been a coordinator before in the NFL. Mark DeLeon has been key in developing Roquan Smith. Deshae Townsend understands coverage as well as a former Mike Tomlin guy. You could do that. But I think out of those guys, I think Jay Rodgers is probably the best candidate on the surface just because he's developed so much talent over the years. But other than that, I think, you're looking at either guys who are currently out of jobs, like a James Betcher, or former coordinators who are not in coordinator roles right now. And, maybe that changes. Maybe the Bears are able to get someone like George Alexander, who's the Dolphins secondary coach, who's only been a position coach in the NFL for a year. Maybe they take a big swing on someone like that and convince him like, hey, look at the talent you're going to get to work with. You should take the risk here. Maybe that's the case. But I think it's more likely that they kind of go for, or their talent pool, quite frankly, is more the former coordinator / internal candidate type.
Yeah, anything could happen. We've seen the Bears hold over defensive coordinators before. Vic Fangio survived the John Fox firing. Maybe defensive coordinators or candidates see that and think, well, even if the head coach goes, maybe I'd be retained if the defense plays well enough. Before we get you out of here, Alyssa, do you have any questions for JJ?
I do have a couple. I mean, he was right there in the center of the action today. So So, JJ, the Bears have a slew of free agents, a laundry list, I think about 30. Among them, Allen Robinson, Mitchell Trubisky, Cordell Patterson, and Cairo Santos. Who do you think of those in-house free agents that the Bears must bring back in 2021?
Allen Robinson, certainly. But let me make a case for Cordell Patterson, because if the Bears are serious about winning next year and they are serious about showing progress, I mean, special teams does matter here. And Cordell Patterson's the best special teamer in the NFL, one of the best. He, not just for his kick return ability, but he does a lot of good stuff on coverage units. You can try remaking your special teams, but losing Cordell Patterson on special teams would be one of those moves that would hurt the Bears on the margins. And that's an area that they've already been depleted in, kind of on the margins of their roster. I think, keeping Cairo Santos makes a lot of sense in the short term, but in the long term, it might not. I mean, it's great that the Bears found Cairo Santos. He's a great story, but a year ago, he was bouncing around and missing 5 kicks with the Titans. Kickers come and go all the time, and committing yourself to a kicker is not always a good idea. So, I would say A-Rob and Patterson are probably the top 2 ones for me.
And so I know we're a little ways away from the draft, but, heading into the draft, what do you think are the Bears' biggest needs? Do you think they're going to take a quarterback in the first round? Do you think they should go tackle? What do you think would be their absolute top?
I think tackle. Ryan Pace has not addressed that position in the draft. He took Tayo Fabaluje in the 6th round in 2015, and then he took Latavius Simmons or Arlington Hambright in the 7th round last year. That is bad. Ryan Pace has got to address that. I mean, I think one of the key reasons why we're talking about the Bears like we are is that Ryan Pace has drafted exactly 1 quarterback or tackle in the 5th round or higher in his tenure as Bears GM, and that's Mitch Trubisky. He has not developed depth at the most important positions on offense, or even given the Bears a chance to develop depth. So I think quarterback and tackle are right at the top of the list. They're going to need another wide receiver. They might need another tight end with Jimmy Graham going out. You probably need more depth on the offensive line just in general. I think you might use another running back, even though you're going to get Tariq Cohen back, although that should not be a priority. Frankly, they should probably draft 2 quarterbacks this year if they can. And then on defense, cutting Buster Skrine means you're going to have a hole at nickel. You can probably address that with a cheap free agent to compete with Duke Shelley. You need to find another safety. I think it's been kind of obvious for a little while. The Bears probably should just draft someone to play next to Eddie Jackson. Maybe you can find someone who pairs better with Eddie Jackson, although Tashawn Gibson did have a good season this year. Basically, though, the Bears have to spend all of their high draft picks on the offensive side of the ball. Even if one of those picks goes on defense, that guy could turn out to be a good player, but it will not be as impactful as just taking a shot with someone on offense. That is where Ryan Pace has drafted poorly over the course of his time as GM. Tariq Cohen, Cody Whitehair, and Darnell Mooney aside. And it's where he's going to have to draft well in 2021 if there is any slim chance of the Bears showing the progress that he needs to keep his job.
Just another Bears offseason. JJ, before we cut you loose, I know you're working on a ton of stuff. Please tell our listeners where they can find your work and how they can interact with you on social media.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at JJ Stankovitz. You can subscribe to the Under Center podcast wherever you get your podcasts. John, thank you for your support with that, as always. We love doing that with myself and Cam Ellis and Tony Gill. We have a lot of fun on the podcast. And then you can read all of our Bears coverage on NBCSportsChicago.com and on the My Teams app.
Friend of the show, NBC Sports Chicago, JJ Stankovitz. JJ, thank you so much for being on Buffone 55. We'll talk to you down the road.
Looking forward to the next one. Thanks, John.
Mm-hmm. We'll be back with more Buffone 55 right after this.
Growing up, I was always told I could be just as good as the guys from my parents, and especially my dad. He would take me to every single football game and said, you could be a great athlete just like these CFL players in front of you. And I never thought I could be less than someone until I kind of entered this career field, and hearing stuff like that, like I'm not allowed to ask the serious questions, or I'm supposed to be not as aggressive, or I'm supposed to be a little bit quiet, or I'm not allowed to be in certain areas like the stadium like the guys are. I don't understand that, because I'm just trying to do my job as well. Just know that there's a lot more hurdles out there to be big time, and I'm willing to jump over them. But if you help support women along the way and don't tear us down, that's so huge. Is just being there as a support system. Is sometimes males will come at you and say you're not allowed to be saying this because you don't know what it's like to be in that sport, which is highly incorrect, because there's tons of male sports broadcasters that have not been in that sport, and there's been a lot that have. But just more support would be super appreciated in any woman that's trying to pursue their dream in anything.
We're jumping into the Buffone's basement segment, where we'll be joined by Aldo Gandia. Aldo, I know you're awake after that interview. How you doing?
I sure am. I'm awake not only after that interview, but what happened at Hallis Hall today. I've been really angry, and a mixture of anger, but mostly just disappointed, because there's just almost no reason to believe that this team is going to right the ship anytime soon. But yeah, the interview with JJ was great. Both of you guys did a fabulous job.
Yeah, and I think kind of what you said, for me, it was a mixture of disbelief, like they're really selling this to us, or they expect us to just be okay with this, and then anger, because we talked about this the entire season. What happens if they're retained? Should they be retained? What's going to happen? And it just seemed like, okay, McCaskey comes on and Ted Phillips comes on. It's like, we're bringing them back because we like them as leaders. And that's basically, yeah. And like JJ said, why are you bringing them back? Because we want to. and that just wasn't enough for a lot of fans. I think all fans, really. So at the presser, we heard, and we talked about this earlier, Ted Phillips saying the Bears have a culture that all teams strive for. We keep hearing about this, and I honestly think it's just a go-to response whenever you have no other excuse for why your team is mediocre, why you aren't beating good teams, why you aren't more of a factor when you talk about contenders. Yeah, they got into the playoffs, but like I said, on numerous occasions, they fell ass backwards into the first ever 7 seed. So, Aldo, what were your takeaways from this presser? And I know you like to be hopeful for a lot of things, but I'm not there.
Yeah, I like to wear my hope cap, but it's hard to with what I heard today. And, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. And, like JJ said, I wish this team had somebody that was helping them with their communication skills and press conferences and so forth much better, because even if you're bringing back these 2 guys, the 3 guys with Ted Phillips, there's just a way to make it a little bit more palatable for Bears fans. You can say things like, I know the results are disappointing. There's nobody angrier than me, George McCaskey. I am upset. But at the same time, I communicate with these guys often, and I really believe in their vision. I think they're going to eventually get this right, and I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. Just kind of fire us up a little bit. But what they kind of offer, George just seemed tired. And now I didn't see the video feed. I was listening on audio. So I don't know, after I look at it, maybe my impression will be different, but he sounded tired. He was surprised by some of the questions, and, somebody would challenge him on a thought and he would say, that's a good point. And he really didn't have a good retort. Yeah. It was really, really bad. It was a catastrophe. And then when Ted Phillips comes in, he didn't make it any better. And Ryan Pace looked like a guy who had just been released from jail, but knew that he had another term to serve immediately afterwards. So I love this team so much. So to see them, go through this today, to see what they had to offer for us fans that love this team. It was very, very disheartening.
Yeah, Alyssa, what did you think it went after you were listening or watching that?
Yeah, however bad we thought this was going to be, and let's be real, we all thought, knowing that Nagy and Pace were coming back, that it was going to be bad. It was worse. Like Aldo was saying, it was just really frustrating to watch. You know, McCaskey just looked completely unprepared. He sounded unprepared. Like there was no sense of urgency. It's just kind of like, I'm here because this is my job and I have to answer these questions by you. And he didn't have any answers. And, you know, like Ted Phillips, again, it just felt like it was like JJ was saying, it just felt really condescending towards the fans. Like they don't think Bears fans are smart enough to understand that what's happening in this franchise is just pathetic, and they're doing nothing. They're setting the franchise back even further. So, and I was watching the video feed, which just it kind of made it worse because you could see them in front of you, and you're like, really, seriously? And it felt like you just wanted to yell at. I wanted to yell at my computer screen. You know, it's just pathetic. To like it was just really frustrating as a Bears fan because again, we talked about it plenty of times on the show. This franchise has been stuck in mediocrity. I think we were holding on to like the slim hope that maybe, just maybe, there would be a step in the right direction. And instead it feels like we've taken like 10 steps backward. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it doesn't seem like there's any end in sight because, you know, Nagy and Pace get another year. But, you know, like John, you were saying, they go all out. They were going to screw this franchise for years to come. And it's just an endless, vicious cycle.
Yeah, and I want to give a quick props to the Chicago media. They held their feet to the fire today. They asked a lot of tough questions, and like you said, George McCaskey looked like, taken aback. Like I don't. That's a good question. Like I don't know who was prepping these people or who. Like, hey, you're probably going to get asked this, and this isn't just the team rep who's going to be asking you questions. There's going to be some difficult questions, and you know that's even more frustrating because what have I been clamoring for the last 2-3 months? Hey, there's going to be a lot of hard questions at the end of the season. Who's going to ask Ryan Pace those questions? Who's going to ask Matt Nagy those questions? And when I see that kind of performance in a press conference, I know for a fact those questions probably aren't being asked because you're not gonna look Ryan Pace in the face and say, why did you sign Nick Foles? And then why didn't it work out with Leonard Floyd? Why hasn't it worked out with Anthony Miller? Why hasn't it worked out? Why didn't it work out for Adam Shaheen? Why did you have to go bring in Robert Quinn whenever you had Leonard Floyd? Why have you been missing on when you missed on 3 or 4 top 10 picks? So why are these questions aren't being answered? Because they just don't want to ask them. You're not looking at Matt Nagy and saying, why did you switch to Foles so quickly? And then why did you not go back to Trubisky whenever you were during this big losing streak or the offense couldn't move the ball? Why did it take so long to figure out the offensive line? Why did it take so long to give up play calling? And what have you learned? And what are you actually going to do differently? I don't think those questions are being asked because they were very unprepared for those questions during the press conference. And if you have already asked those questions, or you have at least contemplated asking those questions, or those go into your reasoning of why you're bringing back Matt Nagy or Ryan Pace, then you would be prepared for those questions because you've already would have asked them in your own head. So that shows me that they weren't ready for that they didn't ask those questions. And it's just going to be, all right, we're going to give it one more year. Why? I like you. You know, I like waving to you in the hallway. So that's what's frustrating. You didn't ask those questions, and you didn't even think about those questions. It doesn't sound like you even contemplated all of those issues going into this decision that you made. And you look at the current state of the Bears, they're primed for a rebuild because they have aging players on defense, a very high-priced aging defense. They don't have anything at the quarterback position as of right now. They have a disgruntled wide receiver number 1 who might want out of there, or you have to franchise tag him for 1 year and then he's gone. You have questions about the offensive line. They played better down the stretch, but you clearly need 1 or 2 more pieces. And these 2 guys are supposed to turn this team around in 1 year, and we're supposed to see progress from what we saw this year to next year? How is that going to happen? You don't have any cap space. You don't have a very good track record in drafting. The current personnel you have right now, that's basically who you're going to be stuck with next year. So I know I'm getting long-winded, but Aldo, what small changes can they possibly make from being this mediocre 8-8 fringe playoff team to showing the progress at 10-6 or 11-5 next year?
I got to ask Alyssa this first. Don't you feel like saying hallelujah when John gets into these rants? It's like, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
over and over and
I
over.
feel like we have to play some of that like music, that intense music, and just like a build up. John, you should have been on that call asking me.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah, like why aren't my question would have been why aren't you prepared for these questions? Why haven't you already asked Matt Nagy or Ryan Pace these questions, and why are you taken aback by these ones? You should have already asked yourself these questions, but they didn't.
Yeah, a good follow-up question too would have been: do you guys realize you're tanking this press conference? It's going really bad.
Are you aware of how bad you look right now? Next question.
And Trevor Lawrence isn't waiting on the other side either, so no tanking.
He's not walking through those doors.
That's right. Well, in terms of improvements, your question, I think given the fact that there potentially will not be any significant player acquisitions via free agency, there might be via trade and certainly in the draft, but it all gets back down to coaching and getting players to play better and getting players to, just perform better. And so, really that's what this team has to hang their hats on. And, Juan Castillo did a good job with this offensive line. And in the middle of the season, he found himself with 3 interior linemen that were kind of playing out of position, and he made some necessary changes after he got back from that COVID absence for a little while. He made some changes, and that offensive line started to play a hell of a lot better. And so if they can find some solutions for the offensive tackle, which is the weak spot of the team, then potentially whoever is at quarterback will have some cleaner pockets to play. And hopefully they can, bring some of these free agents back, the names that Alyssa mentioned to JJ. I think you really need to bring all those people back. Those are like some of the best players on the team. You got to figure out a way to do it. So it's a conundrum. It's a worrisome. I can't find the proper words to just say, I'm worried, man. I'm really worried.
Let's be real. The biggest change that needs to be made is the culture. I know they're talking about the culture and they have the culture that everyone wants, but you need a winning culture where you're actually winning football games. So someone needs to tell Ted Phillips that, because he's just all fine and dandy there with his buddies, Ryan and Matt. And it kind of felt like when they were talking, they like them as people, right? So it's kind of like Nagy is like a likable Mark Trestman in a way. So he's not like a mess. But it's just, changes, they're in a bad position, and it just, it would take a few years to even try to rebuild, and they have 1 year to kind of just go all in. And it's just kind of hard to imagine them really accomplishing anything next season. And you look at their schedule coming up, and, the draft is going to be important. Like Aldo was saying, you have to bring back some of those free agents because they got a lot. Everywhere from like defensive line depth. And then they have, obviously you have some special teamers. Like there's no one under contract on special teams currently in 2021. So they're going to need to, get some new guys in there. But, and again, coaching, like Aldo was saying, like they need to get the best out of these players. And again, that goes back to Matt Nagy, right? This is all on Nagy. His back is against the wall. He knows for sure. He probably was told, hey, you guys got to get it together or you're done next year. So does Matt Nagy, does he get past the stubbornness? Does he actually let Bill Lazor call plays? Is it, does he kind of take a step back? I think we know the answer already because, Nagy's going to Nagy. But, it's just hard to imagine this team really doing anything different this year. I mean, you're going to see some new faces, but you're going to see probably a similar result minus the playoffs.
You talk about that culture that they keep hyping up and how this is a culture that other teams strive for. But the Steelers also did their end of year press conference today. Let me read you this quote from Mike Tomlin, the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He says, "I'm not going to maintain status quo and hope that the outcome changes. That's the definition of insanity." End quote. That's Mike Tomlin, who has all the respect in the world through the NFL, has had some incredible stints as coach. I think he was down to Duck Hodges last year and still didn't have a losing record. The guy's never had a losing record as the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. Do you see a difference there between what Mike Tomlin said and what the Bears are doing? And we're going to talk about culture. Are we noticing a difference there? Because I sure as hell do.
Yeah, it's an acceptance of mediocrity. That was to me, the headline is we're okay being average because we like these guys. I was actually trying to find, is there a word for when parents allow children to do whatever they want? That I was trying to find that word to describe how George McCaskey and Ted Phillips reacted today. It was like, we'll let Ryan and Matt play however they want to, and they won't scold them, they won't correct them, they won't
bad
punish. Bad parenting. That's what it seemed like to me. They're enablers. There you go. That's the word. They're enabling this poor management of the team. And one of the things they talked about culture is, I think it was George McCaskey. There are no egos. Bullshit. I mean, Matt Nagy himself 3 or 4 weeks ago in a press conference says, yeah, I'm a quarterback. I played quarterback. I have an ego. Those were exactly his words that came out of his mouth. And we saw the behavior. He was stubborn, like Alyssa said, he was stubborn and he would not relinquish the chains, and he was slow to adapt and so forth because of his ego. So these guys, apparently, Ryan and Matt get together with Ted and George sometimes, and they pull the wool over their eyes. They're not seeing what 99% of the fans are seeing, which is that these guys, it's really very difficult to trust them. And maybe, they're just lying. Maybe the last 2 days, they spent chastising them and telling them, we're really, really upset with you guys. We really want to fire you, but we got you under contract for a while. And so we're going to stick it out with you guys. We're going to give you one last chance. I would feel a little bit better if in my heart, I felt that might be true, but it isn't. It isn't. These guys don't have it in them to challenge these guys. And then when George McCaskey says he confers with other NFL owners about big decisions, I'm thinking to myself, that's the competition. You think they're really going to give you secrets to how to run a successful organization? I am fed up with this whole thing.
No wonder why this organization's driven into the ground. They're listening to the competition here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They're listening to the New York Giants. Oh, okay.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Let's take pointers from other franchises. I'm sure they have our best interests at heart. But one of I forget who, it was either Ryan or possibly Ted Phillips talking about figure out the quarterback position. That's what the off season's all about, or that's what they're going to be doing all off season, and they're going to fix the quarterback position. So, I like to play games, so get your buzzers ready, because from what JJ said, they could go out and get a very low end veteran and then draft a guy potentially in the first, second, third round, what have you. But they already have Nick Foles on the roster, so I don't know if they're just going to stash him on the practice squad or what they're going to do with Nick Foles. But looking at 2021 with some of the free agents, and we're talking about maybe stopgap quarterbacks, which if you're trying to win next year and you have to turn it all around in 1 year, why are you? Never mind. Let's talk about some of the guys that could be available and whether or not you'd feel okay with them being the quarterback of the Chicago Bears. Don't need just give me a yes or a no, and then maybe like a 1 to 2 sentence explanation why. We'll start with Andy Dalton. Aldo.
You don't
think he can get you the playoffs?
Andy Dalton, Nick Foles, it's a toss-up. I mean, I don't think that any one of them is better than the other. So you're stuck. Apparently, you're going to be stuck with this Nick Foles contract. If not, you're going to release him and eat the money. And so that, to me, doesn't make any sense to pick up a veteran like Andy Dalton, who is essentially Nick Foles. So my answer is no.
Yeah, I'm with Aldo, because if we think back to last offseason, the Bears are pretty much deciding between Foles and Dalton. They're, so they're on the same level. Why do you want two of the same quarterback on the same team? So, I mean, I'm going to pass on Dalton.
All right. Our next contestant would be Tyrod Taylor. Is that a guy that you would want being the bridge, who is the ultimate bridge quarterback? He was the bridge to Baker Mayfield in Cleveland and the bridge quarterback to Justin Herbert in Los Angeles. Do you want Tyrod Taylor as your starter in 2021? Aldo.
He got injured early in the season, right? And then he never returned back to play because Justin Herbert was just so damn good, right? So if it was a team, very team-friendly deal, I might entertain that. But again, you got the Foles issue. I think most of the names you're gonna present here, I'm gonna kind of weigh against Nick Foles and wonder, really, is that going to be much of an improvement? You really need a young quarterback with potential, a first rounder or a second rounder who, Foles or a Tyrod Taylor, if you can get rid of Foles' contract, can get the job done. Oh my gosh, I'm getting depressed. I need a drink.
Alyssa.
I mean, the only reason I would be in on Tyrod Taylor, obviously, like Aldo said, if they get a team-friendly deal, would be the fact that he does usher in like these great quarterbacks after him. So, hey, if we have to go sign Tyrod and then go ahead and draft a quarterback that's going to be our franchise guy for the next few years, I'm all in. But, there's not, like, you look at like the free agent pool, and there's not a lot of options outside of Dak Prescott. So, I mean, I guess I would lean more towards yes with Tyrod than kind of some of the others.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here's a fun one. Would you like to bring the Fitz magic to Chicago? Ryan Fitzpatrick. You bring in the beard in Chicago. Alyssa, I'll start with you this time.
Ding! Sure, let's go for it. I want some Fitz magic. I'm all for the Fitz magic, Shane.
Aldo.
Yeah, I agree with Alyssa. Out of all of these veteran quarterbacks, the one guy I would love to see wear Chicago Bears uniform for a season or two is Fitzpatrick. I've liked him for a long, long time. This guy is a winner. I love his smarts. I love his leadership skills. I think that he's, a much better Chase Daniels. And so if we could make that work, I'm all in. I'm definitely all in. Again, with the caveat that we need to find that quarterback. And with a Fitzpatrick, I might even wait to the third round, to draft a quarterback. Now, again, I'm not saying just draft a quarterback for the sake of drafting a quarterback, but I do think that there are going to be some talented developmental type quarterbacks in round 2 and 3 that the Bears should invest in. But yeah, Fitzpatrick, I'm in.
Okay, well, this is the guy that we talked about before, which is kind of interesting because he has youth on his side. Jacoby Brissett, who is currently in Indianapolis, has some starter experience, has shown some flashes, but was ultimately replaced for Phillip Rivers this year. Aldo, would you like Jacoby Brissett on your team?
Yeah, I would. I like his talent. I think he throws the ball well. He definitely has his capability. I do a little bit more homework to make sure that he can handle the complex playbook, and so there's no reason to think that he couldn't, because he was with the Patriots for a while and had some success and some limited playing time there. So yeah, I would entertain that. Alyssa.
Yeah, I'd entertain the idea too, because I think I think he's like a high-end backup quarterback. So as long as you have the intent of going out and drafting a quarterback and developing him, and to not kind of rely on Brissett for like the long haul, he could be a nice, reliable backup. He'll win you some games, but I don't think overall as a starter. So I mean, I'd entertain the idea though.
High-end backup sounds like a starter in Chicago. Sounds like a winner there. Brissett, only 28 years old, and still has a lot of football left in him. What about the guy currently starting in Indianapolis? Would you bring Phillip Rivers in? Alyssa, I'll start with you. Currently, I don't know how old Phillip Rivers is. He's got to be 39 years old, but whatever he is, would you bring? He's played in the league for 16 years. Would you want Phillip Rivers running the offense in Chicago?
call me after the draft in the offseason and when we see if they fix the tackle situation here on the offensive line, because otherwise Phillip Rivers, it's going to be like Nick Foles again back there, just immobile. And I don't know, it depends on the situation, because I mean, like, Phillip Rivers, great quarterback, but do the Bears have the offensive line to protect him? That's the question.
Yeah. If Phillip Rivers is 39 years old, and the one thing about Phillip Rivers, because Alyssa's right in terms of his mobility, it's probably worse than Nick Foles, but he is really good at sensing the pass rush and getting rid of the ball quickly. I actually looked at how many times he was sacked this year. I think it was like 5 or 6. Now that offensive line with Indianapolis is outstanding, no doubt about that, and that has a great deal to do with it. But he just has a really good sense of getting rid of the ball quickly and not taking sacks. So he'd be somebody I would entertain, again, at a very high team friendly deal. So yeah, I would consider that.
All right, the final free agent contestant on this game we're going to play, and there are other ones like Cam Newton and Jameis Winston, but we've talked about them before. I think Winston probably stays in New Orleans, and we've talked about Cam Newton maybe not fitting in the system here in Chicago. So the final free agent contestant on this game, Mitchell Trubisky.
I knew it.
Aldo.
Why do I gotta go first?
You're bringing back Maserati Mitch.
That's such a tough one, man.
Because he seems like a guy that Bears would go after, right? Even if he didn't play in Chicago, he's like, a low-end former top 5 draft pick.
A high-end backup.
Yeah, high-end backup. Sounds like a Chicago guy.
I would say, and I've vacillated on this whole thing this season. I think the final answer is no. And the reason I feel that way is because I'm my conviction with drafting a quarterback is so strong. And so why would I want to put Mitch through that? Have a veteran Foles on the roster and now bringing in a rookie who is going to get a lot of snaps in preseason and Trubisky be kind of in limbo. I think, because I like Mitch enough to say, listen, you've got wings, go fly, young grasshopper, whatever the saying is. Go out there and find your team, lead them, and have success somewhere else. I just don't think that now that Matt Nagy is here, I don't think the marriage is right. So I would have to say bye, Mitch.
Alyssa.
Yeah, I mean, he seems like one of the better options, but I don't see it happening. I'm with Aldo here. They made it clear in the press conference. Like, it felt like they were just kind of pushing him out. They were backing Foles. I think they're ready to move on. I think it'll be best for both of everyone to go their separate ways, get a fresh start. So, I mean, looking at some of the free agents available, you've seen that Mitch can, run this offense if Nagy takes a step back. But again, like Aldo was saying, putting Mitch through that, and he's been a great guy. He's handled this the right way. He's just because he's not the guy in Chicago, he's been a great guy. So, I mean, I don't see now, especially after today, how he's back in Chicago.
There's actually a bonus round. Ding, 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 ding. Oh, a special bonus
lightning round.
It's just a kind of a wild card where this could be a potential trade opportunity. It would be low end. It's a low end trade. Well, I would imagine maybe a low end trade. Who's to say, really? But a guy who might know the Matt Nagy system, former #1 overall pick, big comeback player. I'm talking about Alex Smith with the Washington football team. If you could get, and he's only 36. He'll be 37 going into next year. So he's actually younger than Phillip Rivers. So would you maybe trade a 4th or even 5th or 3rd, or with a 3 to 5 for Alex Smith to come in and run the offense? He's also ushered in one of the better quarterbacks in the league with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. Is this a guy that you might want to see on the Bears in 2021? Aldo.
I'm reluctant to say yes on that. I definitely love the comeback story. I think he's a great guy and deserves, to be on an NFL team and fight for a #1 spot. But I think that with the lack of mobility, the injury history, I would probably say no, but I could potentially be convinced to say yes, because if he's coming in, he'll know he will know this offense really well, and you could probably get some good production. But I didn't see anything in Washington this season that said, "Wow, I want him." What about Taylor Heineke? He might be a better option. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, I love Alex Smith. Love the story. He knows the offense. It sounds great, but again, I think his lack of mobility concerns me as well, and the injury history. I think I would aim for a younger guy. And I think that, like Aldo was saying, Taylor Heineke, I mean, watching that game on Saturday, I was impressed.
Yeah, and I tend to agree, just because I see there's probably going to be some contractual things there. If they straight up trade for him, they may owe him more money than they can afford to put on the books with already having Nick Foles under contract, and then whatever other quarterback they might draft in the future. So it's a pipe dream. It might work out. Who's to say? Remember, guys, everything's on the table. So everything is on the table.
Even Deshaun Watson?
Deshaun Watson. They're gonna trade Allen Robinson and 2 first-round picks and Jimmy Graham, and I saw every possible thing. And people are just like unloading everything. And they're like, well, what if we gave him 2 number 1s and A-Rob, and we can put Foles in there, and we could trade Jay Leno. We'll give
They're
Jay
probably giving
Leno.
up their firstborns too.
I somehow traded Jay Leno for Deshaun Watson, but the Bears will take it. So everything's on the table. So the last thing I kind of want to touch on is the defensive coordinator position. Obviously, the whoever comes in is going to have a very old defense, but there is some star power on the defense. They still have Khalil Mack. You have an opportunity to get Robert Quinn right, whether he was battling injury all year or not, or maybe he was out of position or feeling awkward in what he was asked to do. Eddie Jackson has shown that he can be one of the best safeties in the league, but has not shown it recently. Then you still have Kyle Fuller, and you have a young cornerback in Jalen Johnson as well. And then you still have a great defensive line with Akeem Hicks, and you're going to get Eddie Goldman back in 2021. Do you think they go internally with this? And do they have to change something schematically? Because we saw that down the stretch, they were a bit more porous. And maybe that was a Pagano scheme thing. Maybe it was the way that he was putting guys in coverage who shouldn't have been there. But what do you think the future of this is? And I'll start with Aldo.
I think that schematically, if you are going to have Robert Quinn next season, then maybe, yes, you should look at converting to a 4-3 defense, or taking the 3-4 defense and really relying a lot on having Robert Quinn as your down defensive lineman, and getting to a point where you're just only bringing him in on passing downs, like you had Robert Mathis at Indianapolis Colts, who would only come in on 3rd down passing situations and would rack up 10 sacks a season. Maybe that would help his production. You've got to figure out a way, since you're kind of stuck with this guy, you got to figure out a way to get him going. And you got to figure out a way to get Khalil Mack going, and maybe a 4-3 defense is the way to do that. So schematically, that has to be looked at as closely as who is going to come in to be the defensive coordinator. And the hot name out there for DC job is Aaron Glenn, who is the defensive backs coach. He's actually a candidate perhaps for some head coaching jobs, but he's the defensive backs coach with the New Orleans Saints right now. And I think a lot of people are going to say, well, go out there and be a defensive coordinator for a year or two before you really are seriously considered for a head coaching job. So he's a strong possibility. And then Terrell Austin, who JJ mentioned, is somebody. I really admired his defenses with the Lions for the first 2-3 years when he was with the Lions, and then injuries really started to take their toll on that, and it showed on the defense. But he's been with the Steelers now and really gotten great results with the Steelers. So those two guys are guys that I would like them to look at. Like you, Jay Rogers, an internal promotion is somebody that I think would be a good idea. I always like to first look inside in the house to see who you got and try as much as possible to promote from within. Raheem Morris is another interesting name as well. So I think there's some decent candidates out there. Mike North was saying Lovie Smith. I wanted to get your guys' opinions on Lovie Smith. But there's been some scuttlebutt, and maybe Mike has some inside word here, but there's been some scuttlebutt that Lovie is interested in returning to the NFL as a defensive coordinator. So would you guys be interested in seeing Lovie be the DC for the Bears? But those are my top three picks. I think are Rodgers, Austin, and Glenn, and maybe Raheem Morris.
Now I'm thinking about Lovey.
That is weird, right?
No, but I think that they're looking for like less turnover too on the defensive coaching staff. So it would kind of make sense to promote from within. And again, look at what happened with Brandon Staley, who, went on, he went with Vic and then he got a defensive coordinator job. And, I think that they do owe it, to, obviously take a look at guys like Jay Rogers and, Monachino and Desai. So, I mean, I could see them looking from within. It's just, again, I'm finding it hard for, difficult to see why some people from outside would want to come in to a situation that's kind of like a dumpster fire right now. But, in order to have that defensive coordinator title on your resume would certainly help.
Mm-hmm.
Bears fans love nostalgia, don't they? So it's like, bring back Lovie Smith. Bring him back.
Bears Super Bowl.
Yeah, same people that were running him out of town when he was 10-6 are saying, bring him back to run the defense. That won't be a power struggle at all whenever the guy who was there forever comes back as the defensive coordinator with a head coach that no one likes right now. I'm sure that'll just be very harmonious and whenever you have to address.
Bring back Jay Cutler too.
Jay Cutler's going to be there. Ditka's going to run the defense too. And we talked about
the band back together, guys.
Yeah, Bobby Douglas. He's still around. I'm sure he's available.
Oh my gosh.
So yes, I think like I said before, I think that they're going to go internal with this. I think Jay Rogers is good. If they're going to fix Robert Quinn and they're going to get more pressure on the quarterback, maybe they go from having, Chuck Pagano was primarily, secondary guy. He worked with defensive backs. Maybe they get a guy who is has a little more emphasis up on the defensive line to see if they can change things up. Maybe he wants to change things up. Maybe he has some ideas to get more pressure on the quarterback. So I think that they could go internal. I think that's what they should do in this situation. But before we close things out, I want to make sure everyone is aware of the new show that Alyssa and I have on the Barroom Network called Pass the Mic, a show all about spotlighting women in sports and sports media. We've had some incredible guests talk about their struggles and triumphs in not just sports media, but as athletes as well. And it's unfortunate that they still deal with a lot of these things in the year 2021. We've heard some very difficult things. We've had some conversations that were very uncomfortable, but that's what that show is all about. And we've had a lot of guests tell us that they've never told anyone this before until they came on our show, Pass the Mic, because they didn't want to be seen as the troublemaker. They didn't want to tell their supervisor about it. They didn't want to be the one that was labeled as, mixing things up. So it's been a rewarding experience all throughout this first season of Pass the Mic. And go back and listen to every episode. None of them are time sensitive, and they're all unique in their own way. So Alyssa, I think you'd agree that this has been quite the first season of Pass the Mic.
It really has. All the women that we've gotten to talk to, and them sharing their stories, and opening the eyes to some people that might not be aware that this is still happening, because even though it's not front and center doesn't mean it's not happening behind the scenes, like you said, because they were afraid to come forward or to look like the troublemaker. But it's just really great to talk to these women about them sharing their struggles, but also their triumphs and what they've accomplished, because, they have accomplished a lot. They've had to work incredibly hard. And like you said, it's been an incredibly rewarding experience. So please make sure that you go back and listen to them and share it with your friends.
Absolutely. We hope you all give the show a listen and share it with your friends. And like I said, it's none of them are time sensitive. So if you want to binge them all in one fell swoop, go for it. If you want to listen to one week and then maybe next month, just go and listen to them all, and please share it with your friends.
And let me add that the best way to stay informed about all the great things happening at the Bar Room is to visit the newly opened website, barroomnetwork.com. Bookmark it so it's easy to find, and make sure to bookmark bearswire.com. I'm the managing editor over there, and we are delving right into the off season. So, there is no off season in the NFL, so we're going to be covering it.
Absolutely. And before we head out, a quick programming note. We intend to be back doing this show for special occasions during the off season. So you can expect a draft show, a free agents show, possibly even a salary cap show before we head back into the weekly grind during training camp. But as we wrap up another season of Buffone 55, I want to talk directly to our listeners. I want to thank each and every one of you that listen to this podcast. Whether you listened every week or this is your first time tuning in, I cannot express my gratitude enough. I know a lot of show hosts give this kind of gratuity when they wrap up a season, but please know that this hits me a little differently. To know that people are listening when you talk about something you're so passionate about is a feeling unlike any other. And sometimes when I get patched into the barroom studio before the show, I'm feeling a little tired or I don't have as much pep as I'd like. But the instant I hear my Uncle Doug's voice on the intro, I get goosebumps and an adrenaline rush every single time. His passion has become my passion. I love doing this show, and I love the people I work with. I couldn't ask for a better producer and co-host than Alyssa Barbieri. I couldn't ask for a better engineer than Aldo Gandia. So we're wrapping up our 4th season here on the Barroom Network, and let me tell you something. This has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my professional life. And that doesn't happen without you, the listeners. Because in this business, you don't get to stick around for 4 years if no one is listening. So as we move forward, please know that no matter who you are or how long you've been listening, you are appreciated. So that will put an end to this season of Buffone 55, but we'll be back soon. For Alyssa Barbieri and Aldo Gandia, I'm John Buffone. We'll catch you next time.